What's up, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube? Boogie2988 coming at you live again through the power of the internet, and you're listening to the Power of the Internet podcast. And today I want to talk to you about the video games that came out in 2023. But unlike the last episode where we talked about the best games, these are the games that made yours and my blood boil because of how truly awful they were. And it's especially egregious when you consider what an amazing year it was for gaming. For all of these other incredible games to have come out that was on the last list, for these other terrible games, is genuinely upsetting and heartbreaking. So let's get into it. Well, with the last episode, I told you Diablo 4 was absolutely going to be on this list. And I figured I should start with that because it's the game that hurt me the most. As I said, I played this in the beta when it came out. I was absolutely excited to play it with my roommates, and we did. We played it every day during the beta. And then Vanilla came out, and I lost one of my roommates. He didn't want to buy it, but my other roommate and I, we powered through it. We raided the dungeons. We killed the bosses. We walked through the storyline. We did end-game content, and we had a good time doing it. And then the first season got announced, and we looked at it, and we said there's not much there, but you know what? We'll start over. I don't know if you know this about Diablo, but you have to restart your characters. You re-roll, make a brand new seasonal character. You get access to new seasonal items, seasonal content, seasonal bosses, seasonal stuff, right? And I was excited to do that. So, lo and behold, if it wasn't a shit show. Out of all the decisions they made, as little content as there actually was for the new season and how it didn't really add enough to the game, and it was mostly about selling you brand new cosmetics and a battle pass, they nerfed the living hell out of this game. And the game could already be a bit of a grind, you know, if you were playing on the highest difficulty level to try to get the best items. The monsters could be pretty damn powerful, but if you had the right builds, you could shoot through them quickly, and it rewarded you for getting the right builds. Well, with the second season, they nerfed pretty much everything, and not just individual classes that were slightly more powerful than others, but they nerfed the game itself. The way they calculated all of the different damages that you did and how they were calculated, it basically turned the game into an incredibly slow grind. And that's not what you want from one of these games. What you want from these games is a loot pinata situation. You want to hop into a dungeon, you want to kill everything as quickly as you can. It's okay if it's a little bit challenging, right? But you don't want it to be a walkthrough, but you don't want to sit there and grind the same trash mobs. And that's what they did. They made it where you had to grind against trash mobs just to get to the elites, just to get to the loot. I guess to increase the amount of time you were playing the game for whatever reason. I don't understand it. Nobody understood it. The entire internet doesn't understand it. I bet the developers barely understood what they were doing. But at the end of the day, it destroyed the internet love affair that everyone seemed to have with this game when it launched. Season 2 did drop, and I did play to max level with that, all the way to level 100 with my friend. I already own the game, don't have to spend any more money on it. I decided to pull it back out, and it was not too dissimilar from the vanilla launch. In fact, I had a pretty powerful build that I enjoyed quite a bit. But this game is pretty much done for at this point. It had a huge drop-off of players, as it should. Nobody's probably going back to this game unless something dramatic happens. And they've already announced their first expansion. And even though they're selling cosmetics, even though they're selling individual items, even though they're selling $20 packs of gems and all this stupid garbage, they still want to charge you for the new DLC. And it's rumored, because of a survey they sent out, that the most expensive version of that DLC could be as much as $100 to buy. I wouldn't pay that for a brand new Diablo at this point. I wouldn't pay that much for Diablo 5. So this game is completely on a path to utter devastation and ruin. And when you look at the Path of Exile 2 gameplay demos and stuff, this game is just done. It's heartbreaking, but it's just done. Hey, if I'm picking on Blizzard, let's stick with it and go with Overwatch 2, which was, I'd like to say hyped of a release, but it was not. because this is a sequel to Overwatch, which, let's talk about Overwatch a little bit first so you can understand my personal perspective when it comes to this game. Overwatch, when it came out, blew the world apart. It was a household name. You know, all the art that was drawn for it, the fan service. People were just obsessed with Overwatch, and it was a damn fine game. It also popularized loot boxes, unfortunately, so not everything nice could be said about it. But over the years, Overwatch stopped getting played as much, specifically because there were competitors on the scene that became, for whatever reason, more popular. So when they announced Overwatch 2, everybody knew what they were doing. Everybody was hopeful, but we all knew that this was basically a reskinning of Overwatch and calling it a sequel, knowing that Blizzard probably would not deliver on enough new content, enough new characters, enough new stuff to call it Overwatch 2. Well, when the game launched, that was exactly the case. They had overpromised and undelivered, and people mostly did not fall for it. I mean, if you own the first game, you could download the second one for free. So, it gave you an opportunity to download it and try to figure out what was there. And what was there was just more Overwatch. Not even more Overwatch, just the same amount of Overwatch. But they kept the promise. More content is coming. Specifically, player versus environmental stuff, PvE stuff. Now, a lot of us, myself included, we are not huge fans of PvP. I don't like PvP because I find it to be frustrating for the most part. I don't like dominating another player. Even when I'm winning, I'm not having fun. And I don't like being dominated in these games. If it pulls out the inner Francis in me, I get frustrated. I get angry. That's not what I want to be doing with my time, right? So ultimately, I would rather fight with a team against environmental monsters. They promised it, and ultimately, they chose to cancel it, which is so frustrating because so many people invested their time and, in some cases, their money on skins and other items in this game, looking forward to that PvE content that will never come. And I just have to say, it makes you wonder what's happening at Blizzard when you could take a game like Overwatch and you can't monetize it enough to deliver on the promises that you've made. For fuck's sakes, you're Blizzard. You've got the money. You're owned by Activision. Activision certainly has the money. Now, I mean, Bobby Kotick is gone now, and everybody's excited and happy about that. That's the CEO of Activision. So it's good to see that changes might be coming, but it's just too late for Overwatch 2, and that sucks. Because Overwatch could have been one of those brands that stuck around as long as World of Warcraft and Diablo and everything else Blizzard owned. This had the characters, it had the world building, it had the design, it had the attention, it had the hype, and Overwatch 2 destroyed it. And, guess it could be worse. If Blizzard's going to take something to the Cosby room, at least it's not me and you, it's just one of their video games. Mortal Kombat 1 was also on my best games of the year list, but that does not include the Nintendo Switch version. And let's just be honest, the Nintendo Switch is 8-year-old software now. Came out in 2017, so what is that, 7 years? Something like that. It definitely needs an update. It needs a refresh. We need a Switch 2, and we're constantly seeing rumors that it's happening because that's how badly people want one to happen, right? And even in terms of handhelds, it's pretty outdated. You got Steam Decks and all these other things. You've got streaming devices that can stream games and make them look better. So there's no real reason for third-party games to be coming out on the Switch. It should basically only be there for the Nintendo properties. And the Nintendo properties continue to look amazing on the Switch because they know how to get the best out of that hardware for some reason. If you look at the Nintendo Switch games that came out this year, they all look absolutely gorgeous. Not the case for Mortal Kombat 1. So you can point out the fact that it obviously was not going to look as good or play as well as the PlayStation, the PC, the Xbox versions. Of course it wasn't. However, there is no excuse for just how bad this game looks. It doesn't look like a downgraded version of those other games. It looks like a joke of a game. And other games that came out this year perform better, with better loading times, with better frame rates, And frame rates are so important for a fighting game. But more importantly, the graphics, just the lifeless animations, the lack of details, just about everything that could be wrong with this game was wrong with this game. And it's embarrassing that they even let it out into the world. If we're talking about bad ports, let's talk about the PC port of Last of Us, which The Last of Us is pretty much the perfect game. If you've not played this game, you should have watched the TV series at the very least. Hopefully you've done both. Say what you will about Last of Us 2, but Last of Us is almost gaming perfection. The story, the narrative, the world building, the voice acting. Some of the gameplay loops are a little frustrating, but most of it's one of those action, spectacle, drama, horror-based. It's a little bit of everything, right? And the last thing you want while you're playing this game is bugs. Well, the PC launch of this was about as buggy as it could be. And instead of having this atmospheric, story-driven horror game, you end up with this buggy mess with things constantly taking you out of the narrative, constantly taking you out of the horror, constantly taking you out of the story, and turning it into a joke game. That's not worth your $70, genuinely. Now, the good news is, if you can pick this game up on sale these days, most of the bugs have been patched out of it. But it's mind-boggling that they let a game like this get released. There must have been zero quality assurance. Because even if these bugs were rare, the fact that they existed at all is not befitting a game like Last of Us made by PlayStation, a game that the PlayStation version of it sold so many copies that you can afford the budget to get this port done right. This game deserved to be done right, and unfortunately it was done very, very dirty. Last of Us 2 will eventually come to HBO, it looks like. That story will get told there. So you don't have to play The Last of Us. You don't have to play the PC port at all. But if you choose to, hopefully it's been fixed by now. But what a disaster the launch for this was. Very disappointing for people who waited forever to play it on PC, only to be this severely disappointed. And a lot of them will never go back to try it. They'll never trust it. And maybe they shouldn't. Sticking with PlayStation, we have Forsaken. And what can I say about this game that hasn't already been said? Let me walk you through my personal experience with it. I saw the gameplay trailers. I saw people talking about it. And honestly, I went into this game expecting it to be pretty good. The graphics look amazing, and I love spectacle fighters, RPGs. I love all of that stuff. So walking into this, I thought I'm going to love this. Open world, RPG, spectacle brawler. What's there not to like? Well, I started the game and got introduced to the main character, got introduced to the world, got introduced to the main hook, and I didn't like any of it. And so instead of wasting my time and continuing to play the game that I was not enjoying, I decided to go to YouTube and watch other people play it. If you want to watch somebody play it, I recommend MK Fire and Ice. He's the person whose gameplay I'm featuring right now. He's got an entire gameplay walkthrough that you can watch in its entirety. The gameplay loops turned out not to be very interesting. A lot of farming, a lot of repetition. But even if you like the gameplay loop, these types of games need a break from that loop, right? And for me, that means, say, God of War, Horizon, or any of these other games. I want good dialogue. I want good storyline. I want good acting. I want good writing. I will do the gameplay loop for a little while, 15, 20, 30 minutes. Then I need a break to hear a little bit of story, to learn why I'm doing what I'm doing, to see if I'm changing the world, saving the world, making the world a better place. Well, unfortunately, the character is not a likable character. The hook is not interesting. The world design is not as nice as it should be. The game looks beautiful. There's no arguing that. But at the end of the day, there's just nothing good about this narrative. There's nothing good about the characters. There's very little good about the storytelling. It's ultimately a huge miss. There's one more thing I wanted to talk about with Forsaken, and originally I wasn't going to include it, but you know what? I'm going to. When this game got announced, a lot of people saw it and they're like, "Oh, female-led game. It's going to flop. It's going to flop." And I'm sure there are plenty of people out there, as disturbed as they are, who don't want to play a female-led game, watch a female-led movie, don't care about those things. But there is some truth to the fact that a lot of the times, when they make a game that has a female protagonist, that's the major selling point. And they don't feel like they need to create an incredible game around it. They don't feel like the writing has to be good, that the storytelling has to be good, that the character has to be good, because, oh, it's a female-led game, and that's all we need. You know, there's a period of time that was probably true, but that's not what's happening anymore. Not in 2024. I don't care if your lead character is male or female. I don't care if they're black or white, short or tall, fat or skinny. Actually, I'd probably be a little stoked if we saw some more fat characters in video games, but I digress. At the end of the day, all I care about is that the game is well written. I didn't like God of War because Kratos is a man. I liked God of War because it was well written, well voice acted, everything about that reboot and the DLC and the sequel. They were all absolutely fantastic. There was very little not to like. I don't like the Uncharted series because Nathan Drake is a male character. I like it because those are action set piece games that really deliver on the promises they make. That's what you have to do. And I do think there is extra difficulty in this market where we're so used to female-led properties just not being as good when it comes to the writing, when it comes to the directing, when it comes to anything else. It has to be. It has to be. I think if you're including diversity in your game, which you should, I want that. I like that. I think you have to deliver an excellent game around it. Because there are those people out there who will not buy your game unless it's so good that they can overlook it. I don't know why people are wired like that, but there are people in this market. But the biggest issue is that some of us are so used to being disappointed when it comes to these projects because you don't deliver on anything else other than the diversity, that we just are skeptical of these games the moment we see them. And we were right to be so in the case of Forsaken. Next up on the list, and I don't have a lot to say about this one, but I had to include it, and I'll wrap it into another game as well, and that's Golem. And, you know, when this game first surfaced, I've heard a lot of people saying, out of all the characters in Lord of the Rings that you could choose to tell a story about, why Golem? That's a bad character choice. I disagree. I'm only mostly familiar with Golem from the movies. I haven't read the books. But what I do know about Golem is that he's a really fascinating and interesting person and character. And yeah, he's not strong and beefy and things along that lines, but he's still capable of creating a very solid stealth game based around him. And I think that could be fun and interesting if done right. Golem was not done right. From the very beginning, if you look at this character design, if you look at the graphics surrounding him, if you just look at what they did with him, oh my God, it's horrific. Then when you get into the deeper parts of it, whether it's the terrible cutscenes, the terrible voice acting, or the terrible quest and world design, nothing about this game holds up. Watch a playthrough of this. It is genuinely embarrassing to the Lord of the Rings name. And I think it's so sad because Golem really could. He's such a tortured character. He's such an interesting character. There's so much to be understood there. And I think if you dig deep into the character that is Golem, people who play through it might have a better understanding of mental illness and craziness and what it's like to be tortured the way Golem is, and still to persevere and try and do the best you can do. And ultimately, Golem kind of is a hero in his own way, right? That story could have been told, should have been told, was not told. And even if they had attempted to do it, the game looks bad, it is badly written, the quests are bad, the gameplay loops are bad. They half-assed it the whole way through. Golem deserved better. Lord of the Rings deserves better. Truly. And speaking of another bad licensed game, Skull Island Rise of Kong was a game that captured everybody's attention for a brief period of time, but not for being good. This game was published by Game Mill, which I think is very fitting, because this is another one of those grab a license, push it out the window, maybe someone will buy it kind of game. Well, it got this attention for whatever reason because it's another one of those games, and it deserved all the negative backlash that it got. You can watch a gameplay video of this and you'll see what I'm talking about, which is really easy to watch a gameplay video of this because the game is only about 3 hours long. It's one of those games where maybe on the surface it looks like it could have been done well, and I think a Skull Island King Kong game could be absolutely fascinating. But when it comes to the boss fights, they are boring and slow and repetitive. The characters are sponges, so you're just using the same moves over and over and over again. You don't have access to very many moves, and the moves that you do get are not interesting or better or even really worth using. The level design is absolutely abysmal, using what looks like assets that were just dragged and dropped in. Some trees look huge, some trees look small. Is King Kong supposed to be huge? Is King Kong supposed to be small here? The sense of scale is off. The world design is off. The character design is off. The gameplay loop itself is bad. And again, if this is like a $5, $10 game that just takes advantage of the license, designed by an indie developer out of his bedroom, maybe, man. But this game could have been better, should have been better, deserves to be better. I'm glad it got the negative attention it got, because I think it draws attention to the fact that there are a lot of games that come out like this, and that you need to be careful with your money, especially when it comes to something like King Kong or Golem or any of these other games. I want a Golem game. I want a King Kong game. I'm hopeful enough to where there's a period of time where I might have dropped $30 on one of these games without checking the YouTube videos first. And if there was no YouTube videos about it, who knows, I might have still dropped that $30, $20, whatever it costs. Unfortunately, for these game companies that try to take advantage of people, these YouTubers exist, and they make sure we know and keep our money safe. Another IP-driven game that was severely disappointing. Overall, every game based on this franchise has been disappointing to me, and that's The Walking Dead Destinies. And this game promises so much. It takes the characters you know, Rick Grimes, Daryl Dixon, all these incredible characters from the AMC TV show, which I once loved. I think a lot of us once loved that show, forgetting what it became in the later seasons, but looking back at the early seasons, especially with Frank Darabont's first season, my God, what a show he created. Of course, everything Frank Darabont works on is incredible, so go watch The Mist if you get a chance. Wow, what a film. Anyway, going back to The Walking Dead, every game has been a disappointment, and Destiny's promised to allow you to retell those stories. Figure out who's going to ally with who lives, who dies, who shoots who deals with what. It delivered on none of it. And it's frustrating because the cutscenes just look so hilariously bad. The graphics are so severely outdated, and some of the story play stuff is interesting. I won't lie. I like some of the storytelling, but most of the storytelling, unfortunately, is done so poorly, so abysmally. And the stuff that's not exciting is hilariously bad. And again, what I want from a Walking Dead game is what I want from any licensed game. I want it to stick true to the source. But with a horror game, it can't be funny, it can't be goofy, it can't be wrong. It's got to be atmospheric. It's got to be well written, well acted, well directed, well made. And when it's not, what's the point? Take a look on screen right now and tell me that this looks like a game that was made in 2023, and I would laugh you out of the room. Wow. Just very unfortunate. It reminds me of late season Walking Dead. What a disappointment. Then there's the case of Redfall, which is made by Arcane Studios. And when you realize it's made by Arcane, that's where it becomes really disappointing, because on the surface, this is not a good game, but certainly not Kong Island, certainly not Golem, but not too far from it. There are rumors that this game was purposely bad because Arcane Studios was asked to make this games as a service style game, and they just didn't want to do it, so they tanked it on purpose. I think that's probably not the case. I think it could be that they were pushed and they weren't given enough time, and maybe there was bad management, or maybe this is just what Arcane is only capable of these days. But unfortunately, Redfall, this is the game that we got. And when you get into it, you're dealing with what should have been on the surface a good game. You know, vampire hunting with your friends. I want to do that. I like the technology. I like all this other stuff. When I looked at the voice acting and we saw these early trailers and gameplay stuff, it seemed a little bit cringy to me, but again, I went into it hopeful. I even was defending this game a week before launch. Wait till it comes out. It's coming out on Game Pass. Don't worry, you'll get a chance to play it for free. Stay hopeful. Stay open-minded. When the game finally came out, we found out that the world was largely empty, that it was hastily designed, poorly put together. It was just as cringy as I was afraid that it was going to be. And when it came to the actual content, when you were actually fighting vampires, yeah. Well, the AI is basically non-existent. It is incredible how buggy and silly this game turned out to be. Now, it's been a year, and I have seen positive things. People saying they've worked on this game quite a bit, that it's fixed, that it's more fun, the AI is better. But even if all of that is true, what's the point in getting back into this game? As cringy and as weird and as frustrating as it could have been, this should have been an Arcane game, and this should have been an Arcane classic. It really should have. And I'm so disappointed that it wasn't. So here we are at this late date. I don't think it's too late for Arcane Studios. I do think we will see good games from them again, but this one, that ain't it. This is not a big game or a popular game on this list, but it is an important game to me. And if you've listened to this series before, you'll know that when I realized this game had dropped, City Skyline 2, I got super excited and rushed to go download it on my Xbox, because when it came out, it was supposed to come to Xbox Game Pass as well. It did not, and it still has not. And that's because this game was utterly a train wreck at launch. It is the sequel to the incredible Cities Skyline. And when you have a game like Cities Skylines 2, it seems pretty obvious what you want to do. You want to take everything that worked in the first game, include it, and improve on it, and add new systems and new features and new functions, and update the graphics system a little bit and make it look a little bit better, which is hard to do because Cities Skylines still to this day looks absolutely gorgeous, right? Well, they did almost none of that. When it comes to the graphics, it looks so bad, at least certainly at launch. It definitely needed to stay at, city planning for a little while longer, I think, is what somebody else said I read on the internet, and I think that's absolutely accurate. This needed to be baked considerably longer before they launched it. The new systems that are there are interesting and fun when they function and function correctly. But unfortunately, a lot of the times they just weren't at launch. Now, it's been several months since launch. There has been one big patch. But at the end of the day, it should be the simplest thing in the world to take a game that everyone loves and make it better. What's so particularly frustrating, though, is that if you were to buy City Skylines 2 or City Skylines 1 today, you should definitely go with City Skyline 1. Not just because graphically it's better and the gameplay, while not all the systems are there, is still superior in a lot of ways, but because of the modding community. And the modding community hopefully will be here for this second game. Hopefully they'll work on it and make it as incredible as it was. But if you own this game on Steam, and once you get into the mods, you have such a gigantic amount of content to download and play with for free, in addition to the base game, which is already plenty amazing. There's no reason to buy City Skylines 2. They just did not seem to take that into account. I would have talked to some big modders, looked at what was working, looked at what was popular in the modding systems, and then included that in your actual game and make it better and pay the modders who made those mods. And they did not. Hopefully they're still working on this game, and hopefully one day it'll reach a point where they're proud enough to put it on Game Pass finally, and I'll play it there. But until that happens, this game was a huge disappointment. And then finally, I wanted to end with, it feels weird calling this a video game because it's not. It was ultimately a scam. And that is The Day Before. And what is there to say about this that hasn't really been said, but I'll say it anyway. These guys cut together what looked like an incredible trailer. And they overpromised, and by the time the game came out, they severely underdelivered. And when you looked at the gameplay trailer, it looked like you were in store for this wonderful co-op zombie survival game where you find people, work with them, maybe murder them, just try to exist in a beautiful world with awesome gameplay systems built off of the games that came before it. And what you ultimately got instead was one of those Tom Clancy style drop in, drop out shooters. And what a disappointment it turned out to be. Now, this game, of course, did launch in early access, and you always have to go into these early access games knowing you probably aren't getting what you're paying for. You're getting a fraction of what you're hoping the game will be. Sometimes you get lucky, and it turns out to be Baldur's Gate 3, and you get everything you were hoping you were getting. But in this case, you got scammed. You got so scammed that they ultimately took this off of the Steam page, and I believe that they refunded everyone, but I don't know if that would have happened had it not been for the initial negative reviews and the initial negative backlash, where they pointed out things like the misleading trailer, or the lack of gameplay, or the empty world that they had designed. And ultimately, I think what happened was when they cut together that trailer, they were hopeful for what they could achieve and what they could do. They ran out of funding. They put something up hoping that people would buy it, and maybe they could deliver the game that they were hoping to make, the one they promised with that trailer. And unfortunately, just never going to happen. So what can you say? Be careful with your money. If you do buy games on Steam, don't forget there are refund processes there. Same with PlayStation, same with Xbox in some cases as well. So be careful with your money. And if you can't know that a lot of the times there are options to get your money back. And thankfully, with a scam like this, most of the time, we'll see complete refunds for everybody. So there you are, the worst games of the year. These are the games that drove me absolutely crazy. These are the games that were the worst waste of your money. Did you buy any of these games? Did you play any of these games? Did you get any refunds? Did you learn an important lesson? Let me know in the comments section below. And as always, thanks for watching. I love you very much, and I will speak with you again soon.